seat over there? Oh. You know, they make hearing aids for that. Yeah. They make hearing aids.
We're going to try to go ahead and get on started. We're going to be in James 4, verses 11 through 17. It seems really short, so maybe we'll get all the way through it. You got me on, Bert? Nope. Any butter? That any butter? Okay. I'm showing us there. All right. There's in the Bob Winton commentary that he wrote on this that we've been using a lot, he's got a lot to say about these verses here, short part of this. And so I want to do the same format that we did the last time that I taught class. Is I want to start in verse 11, and we'll go ahead and read through 17, and then we'll go back and start through it in discussion. So if somebody wants to get verses 11 through 13, and then somebody 14 through 17. 11 through 13, 14 through 17. All right. So if you want to go ahead, Kim, we'll get started right there.
Do not speak evil of one another, brethren. He who speaks evil of a brother and judges his brother speaks evil of the law and judges the law. But if you judge the law, you are not a doer of the law, but a judge. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who are you to judge another? Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow, we will go to such and such a city, spend a year there, buy and sell and make a profit.
14.
Whereas you know not what shall be on the morrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanish away. For that ye ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. But now you rejoice in your boasting, all such rejoicing is evil. Therefore to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin.
Thank you, gentlemen. All right, so we go back to verse 11. Speak not evil one of another, brethren. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law and judgeth the law. But if thou judge the law, thou art not a doer of the law, but a judge. Here James discusses backbiting, slander, or even the encouragement of listening of such. To speak evil of another brother, he speaks evil of God. So, what's some examples you can think of that? When I read this, I really had to think about this a lot, as far as even sometimes in our jokingly ways between each other. Sometimes I got to thinking about it. You know,
Maybe elevating myself.
right?
Because the verse before finished up on last week, humble yourself before it.
Mm-hmm.
So, elevate myself, put other people down,
Right.
make myself feel or look better.
Some of the commentary from Brother Bob. The subject of the wrongful use of the tongue arises once more again, as we talked about earlier in James. He that speaketh evil of his brother and judgeth his brother speaketh evil of the law and judgeth the law. So more space is occupied in this part of the epistle on the subject than on the other. This indicates the inclination on the part of the reader to fall victim to the sin. And thus James addresses the subject in a very strong way. This is a serious spiritual crime today as it was then. He strongly cautions the brethren against speaking evil one of another. James had discussed in detail in the verses preceding the sins which result from the absence of love for God, here he gives attention to those sins which follow from the lack of love for brethren. It is, of course, the want of love for each other that prompts us to express adverse judgment regarding others. We are especially prone to make excuses for those whom we appreciate and love, to excuse, justify, and forgive them for their weaknesses, and to criticize, condemn, and flay those who we dislike. I don't want to get politically, but a good example is of what we hear discussed a lot right now. Either who you like or who you don't like politically. You hear those, an example on this, those that are for one is going to speak poorly against the other, and those that are for that one are going to speak poorly for the other. It's kind of that same example, right? You know, what he's given here, what he's talking about.
Another example, if you've got a brother or sister that's out of duty, and you're talking with other brothers and sisters, and you're calling them slacker and all this and that and the other, instead of going and trying to admonish them to come back and get back right with the Lord, you're judging that person. There's only one judge, and he's going to judge all of us.
And sometimes that's, especially somebody that we expect to be doing something a certain way, and they're not. It's very easy in our human nature to speak to that. You know, I expect you to be a certain way and be doing a certain thing, and when you don't do it, Ken, instead of expressing it to you, a lot of times I may express it to somebody else. That's
what I hit you with my cane.
that's the thing that comes around, that, and I had to kind of examine that really good and look at that. Another thing of it, and I think he's talking about here, let me find where it was. One may speak evil of another by unjustly criticizing his actions, words, life, by taking up evil reports originated by others against a brother and giving them further circulation. Hearing it from one, telling it to another one, that and tells it to another one. We would probably kind of use the word gossip in that a little bit, because it's not necessarily something we 100% know for sure, but is it something that even needs to be passed on anyway? And it's very easy sometimes to get caught up in that and just continue. Somebody asks you a question about somebody. Sometimes it's very easy to just say things without realizing what you actually said, and passing it along. So the whole thing about James, the book of James, it's able to be applied not only then with the things that was going on then in that brethren that James was speaking to, but applied today, because it's the same things.
Well, look what Jesus said in Matthew 7, 1 through 3. Judge not that you be not judged. For with what judgment you judge, you will be judged. And with the measure you use it will be measured back to you. And why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not consider the plank in your own eye?
1 John 2, 10 and 11, he that loveth his brother abideth in the light, and there is none occasion of stumbling in him. But he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he goeth, because the darkness has blinded his eyes. Anybody got anything else on verse 11? Comments? We'll move on to verse 12. There is one lawgiver who is able to save and to destroy. Who art thou that judgest another? Who's the one lawgiver? Jesus. It says, who is who is able to save. What is the safe place that's talked about here?
Yep.
Okay, heaven. So is able to destroy, where would that be at?
Send you to hell.
Hell. And it says, who art thou that judgeth another? Who would that be considered? You could use the word hypocrite in there. We have some brethren, for example, who want to bind their ideas, say, about something like orphan homes, and others that thus make what James calls pure and undefiled religion sometimes something that brethren are not supposed to do. Want to bind one thing, not bind the other. So we'll look at some of what Brother Bob had to say on it here. Matthew 28:18, and Jesus came and spake unto them, saying, all power is given unto me in heaven and in earth. So the one lawgiver, able to save, able to destroy. He has power in heaven and in earth. John 6:68-69, then Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? Thou hast the words of eternal life, and we believe and are sure that thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God. John 12:48-50 through 50, he that rejecteth me and receiveth not my words hath one that judgeth him. The word that I have spoken, the same shall judge him in the last day. For I have not spoken of myself, but the Father which sent me, he gave me a commandment, what I should say and what I should speak, and I know that this commandment is life everlasting. Whosoever I speak therefore, even as the Father said unto me, so I speak. The principle of the passage may be violated by legislating where God has not, by enacting laws which violate what God has said, by trying to make void some part of God's will, or by watering down the truth.
Maybe making it what I want it to be. It's all about me.
Well, it's like I said, here we're talking about in the church, some brethren want to bind one part because that's the way they want it, where others want to bind another part because that's the way they want it, and neither one of them are within God's law. So for James to say this to the brethren that was going on then, there must have been some part of that going on. Because he points out there's only one lawgiver and there's only one judge. So regardless of what you think should be this or you think should be this, there's one law on it that you're supposed to follow, and there's one judge that's going to judge you on whichever part you're pushing or not pushing. So he was pointing them back to the law that was given is what they're to follow, and that the bickering between them, which we hear that now. I mean, how many times have we heard that between different congregations, from congregations, different brethren? We know it goes on. I know it goes on a lot in denominational. We have a lot of customers that talk about different things that goes on, the arguing that goes on about that. And so it's, I think, to me, I look at it and think of a power grab kind of, with the kind of how the Jews were in the Sanhedrin Council when Jesus, what was the deal with them? They had been living this way and had things set up kind of in their deal, and what they were getting and kind of how they were living and being able to live pretty good with Rome and how things were going and getting what they want, and all of a sudden Jesus is here saying, this is the law. This is what it's going to be. And they didn't like it. They wanted to argue it. They wanted to do everything they could, to the point they figured out the only way to get rid of this problem that we're having is to kill him. And that's what was done, which was the way God had set it up. Anything else? Anybody have anything, comments? Okay. We'll move on to verse 13. Go to now, ye that say, today or tomorrow we will go into such a city and continue there a year, and buy and sell and get gain. I'm going to go ahead and read 14 and 15 with this. Whereas ye know not what shall be on tomorrow, for what is your life? It is even a vapor that appeareth for a little time and then vanish away. For that you ought to say, if the Lord will, we shall live and do this or that. James brings in a discussion here the presumptuous person who leaves God out of his plans, who makes decisions based on things without thinking about God or what God would have part in. The story of I'll build bigger barns. I'll tear down what I have and build bigger barns. I have a problem understanding that. I got one barn. If I needed another one, I sure wouldn't tear down the one I had. Have you looked at today's lumber prices? You know, and so I think about that. I mean, this guy is, when they talk about boastful, to me is boasting. I've got so much money, evidently, grain, evidently, land, probably some type of power, that these little barns ain't no big deal. I'll just wipe them out and build bigger. But we know that his soul was required of him that night. All that was in vain. If he'd have finished it all, it was in vain. So, you know, in the verse, he is called a fool, thou fool. Go to now, translated come now. In the ASV, it's translated come now. Brother Winton had a lot that I really liked on this. Perhaps all languages have an audio device by which attention is called to a particular statement about to be made. We use certain expressions to that end. Come now, listen, see here. King James has one here that is similar to this, go to now. James uses this means to call attention to an important matter. So when you look at the first part of 13, go to now, listen, pay attention to what I'm about to say. This is just another in a rather long list of items in which the brethren needed instruction and correction, dependence on God, and the most fundamental premises of Christianity, the disposition to leave him out of our affairs, is something that I think in the world, in humans, they do on a regular basis. I mean, we can see that. Brother Winton says, when to this is added the feeling that is not needed in such plans, the attitude in godless in nature. Some of the brethren have been making great plans regarding business ventures which did not include any consideration of God's will. They stated bluntly that they would go to a certain city, remain there for a specified time, and in the process obtain substantial profits. This was a attitude on their part They did not see the need to invoke God's assistance. They did not take into account any outside hindrance that might interfere with their carefully laid strategy. There was nothing wrong with their careful planning. Their error was in leaving God out of their plans. How often does that happen now?
Leaving God out of the plan happens a lot.
John said something years ago I've always liked. Talked about in making plans, how many times does God sit and laugh at our plan? Me and John had discussions a lot when we worked together, and sometimes he would say some things that has stuck with me for years in the way he would dissect something and then apply it. And I remember we were talking about this for some reason. I don't know if we had been studying something in class at that time, but we were talking about it one day. And I remember John saying, he said, I think God sits back and laughs a lot when I'm thinking about what I'm going to do. I remember you saying that, and I thought, he probably does me too, because I plan a lot of things, especially with the farm. I try to look into the future and try to see what I need to try to do or try to figure out how things is going to go. And that's a type of business plan. John has to do that with what he does. I have to do it kind of sort of with what I do at the shop, is you kind of got to try to look in, and that's part of business. The difference is if you look into that and you don't think that you need any of God's help to get it accomplished, that's where the problem comes in. Making plans is not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. With money, we are to be good stewards of money, right? If we blindly try to go into a business adventure or something without actually looking at the pros and cons of what that business is, or where we're going to spend money, or how we're going to spend money, or how we're going to get the money to spend in the beginning, that falls on us. That's something that we're supposed to be a steward of, because where does all of it come from anyway? It's all God's to begin with. We're just allowed to use it. And that's it. We're allowed to use it. And so we're responsible in how we use it. I'm not pulling my chain, and I'm not saying I made the right decision, but I made a decision today to buy some fuel that I really didn't want to pay for. Because based off the information I'm getting, at the time I'm going to need the fuel, it's going to be nearly $2.50 higher then than now. But to try to make a good decision with the money I had, I felt to be better to go buy a large quantity of it today and use it then, huh?
Did you freeze it?
No, I put it in the barn. I hope it don't evaporate. But I think that was a good decision. No, Jake asked me if we need to put a chain lock on it. But I tried to think about it. All this is in God's hands.
Yeah.
And I'm trying not to worry about what it's going to be, because I know He's handling it.
Just because He's handling it doesn't mean that He didn't give us the good sense to make good decisions.
Exactly.
I've heard people say, well, we'll just pray about it. Well, yes, you need to, but He also gave you common sense and knowledge to take what and apply it.
Right.
Well, in general.
He gives the common sense. Whether people choose to use it sometimes is the thing.
Well, that happens too, but the point is, he expects us to use
Right.
what He gave us and apply it. He doesn't expect us to just sit back and,
Well, if we
for
just,
things to fall in our
right,
lap.
if we just sit back and just prayed about it every day,
We'd get up, go to work,
It's not a bad thing, right? It's not a bad thing to pray about it. That's what we're supposed to do. But like Bethany said, if we didn't go to work, if we just laid down at night and prayed that, okay, just send a check to me, put food in my refrigerator overnight, pay my power bill for me, all that. I'm gonna tell you, after about a month or two of doing that, Alabama Power's probably gonna cut your power off.
They've got
Okay.
a good little joke about that. It's been told for years by the guy that was getting away from the flood. The guy came by on
Yeah,
the horse.
exactly right. There it is.
The guy came by in a boat, and then when he died, he said, "Well, what happened, Lord?" Well, I sent 3 people to rescue you. What happened?
Yeah, common sense. We have to work to do something. We're given the opportunity to have a job, to be able to make means for our families, and to use that money in the right places. There was nothing wrong with them making a decision to go to another city, to take a product that they thought they could take and sell it, but they had no regard for God in it at all. And that was the problem. And so he's addressing this there. We'll get on down to one of the problems that we have in the world today, and another part that I feel like James is addressing here is sometimes we feel like we're the ones that's got to fix everything, right? Sometimes. That we got in the position, or that we have to do it alone, right? The world thinks that a lot.
But we're not alone. That's where that whole praying thing comes in.
Exactly. The world has got that mentality really bad. Or let's go the other extreme with it. These guys, if they were making plans like this, more than likely they had already made or had some success in their business. If they were ready to, say, go stretch out a little bit. So they may have been thinking, hey, look what I did. I got a little money now. We're going to go on over here. We're going to make some more money. I done got all this. It goes back to the guy with the barns, right? I've did this. I don't need you. Same thing there. I think he's addressing it there with this the same way. I think we would say to some of our younger ones, maybe they got a little too big for their britches.
You don't ever get too old for that lesson.
That is truthful.
I can, we all have different times in our lives when there's things that happen that make a difference from now on. And in this particular time, I owned multiple houses, had to tear one down, still didn't have one for my family to live in. And I didn't have enough money for another house. I did the math. I'm actually pretty good at math. That's what I get paid to do. And I didn't have it. And me and a buddy of mine was talking one night. He said, "Man, you know what? You're just gonna have to quit thinking about it and just start doing it." And I said, "You know what? That's exactly what I'm gonna do." And at the end of each month, I told Bethany, I said, "At the end of the month, we're gonna spend every dime we've got building on that new house, and then we'll go through the next month. When we get there at the end, we're gonna spend every dime we got working on the house." And about 8 months later, we had a house. But
And you didn't sleep out in the yard in a sleeping bag one night, did you?
well,
No, we was real close though.
I think y'all did stay at a camper a little while. I remember that, right? I remember Bethany said I wasn't on a camper for nothing. I remember that. I do remember
I've
that.
done my dead level best not to stay in one since.
35-foot diesel pusher. It wasn't a big sacrifice.
I thought I remember that.
It wasn't my 4-bedroom, 2-bath.
The point being that, that we never get too old to learn those types of things. And it's funny because I do plan a lot, and my plans at that point in time had not gone
Yeah.
the way I planned it
Yeah.
at all. And because I was pretty proud of the things that I had accomplished thus far, it kind of blinded me as to the settings, that's what I'm gonna do. I ain't gonna think about it no more.
Faith can be a scary thing sometimes. And when I say that, I mean sometimes to take what people like to call the leap of faith, sometimes can be a scary thing. This building, this whole church is built on nothing but faith. And when I say that, I know what our religion, we're to have faith in Jesus, but what I'm trying to say is the building and purchasing and ongoing of this whole congregation from beginning to end, for those that I will say is the forefathers kind of this congregation, that y'all remember them conversations in them rooms of large amounts of money that we were like, we're not sure how we're going to do this. And it would just magically appear in a check form. And when I say that, I'm not lying. It just would appear a check. And that was faith. And knowing that if we were doing what we were supposed to do and continuing on and making the plans based on that, and it just kept happening and kept happening and kept happening. And for the first time in my life, I had a physical thing to look at that I was seeing on a weekly basis. I mean, it happened like that. I am not lying, am I, Jay? It happened like that I was able to see that, look, like John said, just do it. Just do it. Build the building, get the land, it will be took care of. And it was. And I will never forget, that was a lesson that I learned. And I'll never forget that, because now I still worry a little at the shop and dealing with things. I try not to. I just try to say, hey, go with it and go. But sometimes I feel responsible for other guys' lives that's there and their income and what's going on. And so it weighs me a little bit. But I just have to keep remembering, just keep doing what I'm supposed to be doing, the way I'm supposed to be doing it. And it'll take care of itself.
There's a good story about a German missionary. His name's George Mueller
Mueller?
in England, and he started an orphanage in England for the children because he saw the street kids. And he saw there was a need for that, so he based it on, there was an orphanage in Germany, and he started one in England, and everything he did, he said he wasn't going to do anything like ask people for money or have donations and everything. He would just pray, and on faith alone, he would ask God to give him the money to start these orphanages. And what would happen was people would, he would ask for a need from God, and these people, I felt this in my heart to give you this money. And he would ask him and say, are you giving me this money out of your heart because you felt a need to do that? They say yes. And it started back in the mid 1800s, and it lasted until the 60s, the mid 60s, I want to say. And they said that people had given him money personally. It was over $700,000, but he gave it all to the orphanage that he was running. But they never wanted for anything. And there'd be times like, the children were waiting for the food. There was no food there. But at the last minute, somebody showed up with food. And I think that, and he actually did say God was, testing him to make sure that he would stay with him with his prayers and his faith that God would provide for him through people. That's exactly what happened.
Well, he definitely provides for us in all ways. Try to get through the last two verses real quick right here. Here I think James is referring to some of what we talked about, but now ye rejoice in your boasting, as such rejoicing is evil. Verse 17, therefore in him that knoweth to do good and doeth not, to him is sin. So 16, he's talking about, but ye rejoice in your boasting. John made a remark a while ago, I think, that kind of goes to that, and tell me if you don't think I'm right on it, but John said something about that he had got to the point where he felt pretty proud of what he had come about, was able to do with what his planning and things had done. I think he's referring to these guys here, like we talked about. They had done very well in their planning, and they was feeling pretty confident about that at that point. Kitty?
The New King James says, now you boast in your arrogance. I think that's what
Yeah,
it says.
yeah. Yeah, they had got to feeling pretty good about where they were at and what they had, to the point they were feeling they had done it all on their own, that they had done that. I had to keep reminding myself all the time that in what I feel like I have been very blessed in my farm life. I look back to what my granddaddy, both sides of my grandparents, what they had at the age that they were at when I was at a certain age, and how they worked and how they done. And then remembering what Mom and Daddy had as I was growing up, and they were working a farm. And I sometimes stand back and look at the farm and that I have now and go, the good Lord has took care of me all through this, has allowed me to have the things I have that's way more than what my granddaddy or grandparents had at that point in their life. But sometimes it's very easy to look back and go, hey, I made a good deal on buying that tractor. Or I made a good deal on buying them cows right there. When it wasn't all me. The good Lord allowed that to happen at that point in my life, to be able to accomplish and have that there. It's all His anyway. And I take it kind of real personal about the way I try to take care of them cows. I've always prayed and thanked Him for allowing me to have them cows and allowing me to take care of them. And Kitty will tell you in a heartbeat, I will get out there in the middle of the night when it's cold and it's raining, and I will birth calves and I will take care of them, because I feel like God has given me the opportunity to take care of that calf, to get it alive, to have it. And it's sometimes hard to remember that sometimes, that we're allowed to have each and everything we have. We're allowed to do all the things, whether it's work, whether it's fun, whether it's play, whether we don't have to be allowed to do that. And so, we could be in the Ukraine right now. We could be in their shoes. Or we could be in India, where COVID was really, really, really bad, with no Dollar Generals to run to or get medicine at or any of that. And so here James finishes up with them, kind of giving them a warning about their arrogance and boasting, and telling them that, hey, if you know to do good and you doeth not, it's sin. That if you know what you're supposed to do, and they're also thinking back on the law a whole lot there too, things they were told to do. It's your responsibility. If you know you're supposed to be doing that and it's supposed to be good and you don't, it's wrong. It's a sin. It's on you. So, any comments, questions?
Good job.
Thank you. James has been tough. It's been tough. But it's very easy to take parts out of James and apply it, because it's not only, like I said, for the past, it's for the future. So, thank y'all.